They only wanted a quiet night. Two brothers, identical twins, walking into a bar like anyone else, laughing, blending into the crowd, unaware that within minutes, their lives would hang in the balance. To the outside world, they looked like any other young black men, ordinary, vulnerable, easy to target. But these twins carried something hidden, something the men in uniform would never expect. When the officers arrived, the atmosphere shifted. Stares turned cold, whispers sharpened into threats, and the weight of suspicion fell hard on them, without reason, without cause. It wasn't about law or order. It was about power. About skin. The twins knew this wasn't the first time. But what the cops didn't know was that this time, they had picked the wrong men. Men trained for battles most of us couldn't imagine. Men who carried titles and honor that could shatter every false assumption in that room. So how did a routine night turn into a confrontation that exposed everything? This is their story. So how did a routine night turn into a confrontation that exposed everything? This is their story. Before we begin, let me ask you, where in the world are you watching this video from? Drop your country or city in the comments, I'd love to know. It started like any other night. The city was alive with the hum of weekend energy, bars spilling light onto the sidewalks, laughter echoing from corners, the faint sound of music carried by the wind. For Marcus and Malik, twin brothers, it was supposed to be nothing more than a chance to unwind. They had grown up together, trained together, lived through storms that only brothers could understand. Tonight, they wanted to disappear into the crowd, just two faces in a sea of many. From the outside, they looked ordinary, two young black men in their late 20s, dressed sharp, carrying themselves with quiet confidence. But beneath that calm surface lived a history most people could never imagine. Marcus wore the discipline of leadership in every step, while Malik carried the weight of silent resilience. Few could guess that their bond had been forged not only in childhood but also in service, sacrifice, and battles fought far beyond these city streets. Inside the bar, the world seemed familiar. Clinking glasses, neon lights buzzing faintly, the smell of fried food hanging heavy in the air. They blended in easily, ordering their drinks, laughing at a private joke, enjoying the small freedoms that many take for granted. For them, moments like this mattered. They weren't just nights out, they were reminders that even after years of sacrifice, they could still feel human, still feel alive. But beneath the laughter and warmth lingered something unspoken. A truth they had carried their entire lives, that no matter their achievements, no matter their rank or title, to some people, they would only ever be seen as targets. Their skin was their uniform in this city, one they couldn't remove. And on this night, that reality came crashing back in the harshest way. A group of officers walked in, loud, commanding the room with their presence. The shift was instant. Conversations died down. Eyes darted away. The atmosphere thickened, as if the air itself knew trouble had arrived. Marcus and Malik noticed the glances. They felt the weight of suspicion, even before a word was spoken. To everyone else, it might have looked like just another routine patrol. But the brothers knew better. They could sense the tension building, the same way they had felt danger rising in far-off battlefields. Except this wasn't war. This was home. And it was about to become a battlefield of its own. The officers had no idea who they were dealing with. No idea of the ranks these men held, the lives they had risked, or the power hidden behind their quiet stares. What began as a simple night out was about to explode into a confrontation that none of them would ever forget. The moment the officers entered, the energy inside the bar shifted. It wasn't subtle. Conversations dimmed, laughter faltered, and all eyes seemed to flicker toward the twins, as though everyone in the room already knew who the spotlight would fall on. Marcus and Malik tried to ignore it, sipping their drinks, keeping their composure. But deep down, they both felt it, the storm was coming. One officer in particular, broad-shouldered with a scowl carved deep into his face, locked his gaze on them. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't professionalism. It was the kind of stare that stripped away dignity before a single word was spoken. He leaned toward his partner, muttered something under his breath, and both began to walk toward the twins. The sound of their boots against the floorboards cut through the hum of the bar. Slow, deliberate, heavy. Each step turned the brothers' relaxation into tension. Malik's grip tightened on his glass. Marcus's jaw clenched. They had faced worse, combat zones, nights where survival was uncertain, but this was different. This was home, and still, they weren't safe. IDs. Now. The officer's voice sliced through the room. He didn't ask. He demanded. The twins exchanged a look. They knew their rights. They knew they had done nothing wrong. But in that moment, it didn't matter. To resist could mean escalation. To comply could mean humiliation. It was the trap they knew too well, the one black men across the country fall into every single day. Marcus slowly reached for his wallet, his movements calm, deliberate, controlled. But before he could even pull it out, the officer's hand twitched toward his holster. The message was clear: any sudden move could be treated as a threat. Malik's heart pounded, his body tensed, every instinct screaming to protect his brother. The bar had fallen silent now. Patrons watched but said nothing. Some looked away, unwilling to get involved. Others stared with wide eyes, frozen between fear and curiosity. It was the kind of silence that told the twins they were on their own. The officer grabbed Marcus's arm roughly, yanking him to his feet. "You fit the description," he growled. No explanation, no evidence, just a phrase that had justified too many arrests, too many deaths. Malik stood too, ready to intervene, but another officer stepped in front of him, blocking his path, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Marcus steadied himself, refusing to be shaken. He knew he couldn't reveal who he was, not yet. Not here. To say it outright would sound like arrogance, like defiance, and might make things worse. So he stayed silent, letting the officer's grip dig into his skin. But Malik couldn't stay silent. His fists clenched, his voice low but firm. "He hasn't done anything. Neither of us have." The officer's smirk widened. "Funny. You think you can tell us how to do our job?" The words dripped with venom. They weren't just enforcing authority, they were abusing it, twisting it into intimidation. And every second that passed, the danger grew. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. A coincidence, or a sign that backup was on its way? The twins knew what that meant: more uniforms, more power tilted against them, fewer chances to walk away unharmed. Marcus's mind raced. He thought about the years of service, the medals, the missions where he'd put his life on the line for a country that now treated him like a criminal in his own neighborhood. Malik thought about the sacrifices, the nights away from family, the wounds both seen and unseen, and how, despite all of it, this was still their reality. The officer shoved Marcus back against the bar, the impact rattling glasses. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but still, no one moved to help. Fear had silenced them all. Malik stepped forward, his voice sharper now. "That's enough." The officer turned, eyes narrowing, hand tightening on his weapon. The air grew heavy, every second stretching into eternity. Malik could see it, the decision being made behind those cold eyes. He knew what could come next. The bar was a powder keg, seconds away from ignition. And then, another officer pushed through the crowd, whispering something urgently into the ear of the one holding Marcus. Whatever it was, it made him pause, just for a moment. But the damage was done. The room was on edge. The twins stood cornered, humiliated, stripped of dignity before an audience that pretended not to see. What the cops didn't realize was that their targets weren't just two young men. They were standing in front of a captain and a commander, men who had faced enemies far greater than them. Men who weren't about to be broken. But for now, they kept that secret hidden, waiting for the right moment to turn the tables. And when that moment came, it would change everything. The officer's grip tightened on Marcus's arm, knuckles whitening as if he were restraining a criminal rather than an innocent man. The room seemed to shrink, walls pressing in, air growing heavier with each second. Malik's body burned with rage, every muscle screaming to strike back, but he knew one wrong move could end everything. The officer shoved Marcus harder against the bar, his voice a low growl. "Don't move. Don't speak. You people never learn. The words cut deeper than the physical shove. You people. A phrase that had echoed across generations, now hurled like a weapon in front of an audience too afraid to intervene. Some looked away. Others pulled out their phones, recording quietly from the safety of distance, hoping to capture a spectacle without ever daring to stop it. Malik stepped forward, closing the gap, his voice sharp, commanding. Enough. Let him go. The officer turned, his hand dropping toward his holster. That single motion shifted everything. The bar fell into a suffocating silence, every patron frozen in terror. Marcus could hear the sharp intake of breath around him, the sound of hearts pounding in unison. He knew what came next. He'd seen this story play out before, unarmed black men reduced to hashtags, names on banners, memorials carved into grief. For one split second, the world slowed. He thought of his mother's face, the pride in her eyes when he had pinned on his captain's insignia. He thought of the flag he had saluted, the oath he had sworn to protect a nation that now pressed him against a bar like a criminal. Was this how his story would end, not on the battlefield, not in service, but in the hands of men sworn to protect and serve? Malik's chest heaved as adrenaline surged. He had faced death before, but never like this. Not on American soil. Not for simply existing. He locked eyes with the officer, his voice low but filled with steel. Do you know who you're putting your hands on? The officer sneered. Doesn't matter. But it did. Because in that instant, Marcus straightened, his voice cutting through the thick silence. Calm, firm, undeniable. Captain, United States Navy. He let the words hang, heavy, impossible to ignore. Malik followed, his tone just as sharp. Commander, United States Navy SEALs. The bar erupted in whispers. Phones lifted higher, recording every second. The officers froze, confusion flickering across their faces, arrogance colliding with disbelief. They had walked in assuming power, but in one breath, the ground beneath them shifted. The lead officer's jaw tightened, unwilling to back down, yet the doubt was there now, visible, raw, unmasked. He had threatened men whose ranks outranked his world, whose service demanded respect he had denied them. But the damage was done. The humiliation, the danger, the near-trigger pull, all of it was still seared into the air. No revelation of rank could erase the truth, that in this country, even heroes could be treated as suspects. The tension in the bar did not dissolve with their words. Even as their ranks hung in the air, Captain, Commander, the officers' faces hardened, pride wrestling with shame. The crowd stared, caught between disbelief and silent outrage. For Marcus and Malik, it wasn't victory they felt. It was exhaustion. Because no matter their titles, no matter the battles they had won abroad, the war they faced at home was one they could never escape. The lead officer finally released his grip, but not with an apology, only with a clenched jaw and averted gaze. He backed away slowly, trying to salvage authority he no longer had. His partner muttered something under his breath, a mix of anger and embarrassment, as the whispers in the room grew louder. Phones stayed raised. The world had witnessed what happened, and this time, there was no hiding it. Marcus straightened his uniform shirt, his breathing steady but his chest burning. Malik's fists slowly unclenched, though the fury in his eyes remained. They had walked into that bar as brothers looking for peace. They left as symbols of a deeper truth, that even when cloaked in honor, sacrifice, and achievement, they were still seen first by the color of their skin. The ride home that night was silent. Neither needed to speak the thoughts racing through their minds. They had faced bullets, bombs, and enemies sworn to kill them, yet what had shaken them most was the reality that their own country saw them as threats. That truth lingered heavier than any battlefield memory. And they knew, they weren't alone. For every Marcus and Malik, there were countless others without uniforms to shield them, without ranks to force hesitation. Men and women who faced the same humiliation, the same suspicion, the same danger, without the small protection of status. That was the true injustice. That was the wound that no medal could heal. In the days that followed, the video spread. Strangers debated what happened, some calling it proof of systemic racism, others defending the officers. But for Marcus and Malik, the argument itself was the reminder of how far the world still had to go. Their story was not just theirs, it was the story of millions. A story written into sidewalks, police reports, and funerals across the nation. And though they had survived that night, they knew survival was not enough. Survival was not justice. As you listen to their story, remember, this is not just about two brothers in a bar. This is about a system that judges before it sees, that condemns before it listens. A system that turns uniforms into targets and skin into evidence. The question isn't whether Marcus and Malik were strong enough to endure it. They were. The question is how many more will have to. How many more brothers, sisters, fathers, and mothers will have to explain their worth, their innocence, their humanity, before the world finally listens. This story is a reminder, a warning, a call, because silence allows it to repeat. And only when enough voices rise will the cycle finally break. So ask yourself, when the next Marcus or Malik steps into the room, will we see them for who they are, or for what fear tells us they are not? If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Together, your voice can help break the silence.